So in light of today's ruling, you have talked about the legislature needing to look at the current laws we have ahead of next session. What kind of ideas do you have?
Well, I think part of it is that I don't know what is already in statute that needs to be addressed. We know right off the bat that our Constitution and in statute prohibit same-sex marriage. Clearly that should be at the top of the list. But there are other important parts of just being able to live and work in Texas that we need to look at to make sure we're not being discriminatory. May have something to do with insurance, may have something to do with adoption. There's all kinds of issues we might need to be addressing. That's the whole point, though, is now that we've had this momentous occasion with the Supreme Court ruling, we need to make sure that our state statutes are in line with the intent of that ruling.
Seems like the governor and the attorney general and the lieutenant governor want things to happen a little faster when it comes to specific legal protections for people when it comes to their faith related to this ruling. Do you think that that's something that lawmakers will try to dive into quickly?
Well, quite frankly, that seems to be a solution in search of a problem. The fact is we do already have those protections in place. The Religious Restoration Act is specifically in place, and those protections were already in place, and they are not changed by the Supreme Court's ruling. So from my vantage point, I don't see the need to be addressing anything there. I don't see why there would be any expedited effort to do something that's not necessary. If it does happen, I would suspect it's probably more for political purposes.
Yeah, I mean, it already looks like they're looking at things. I mean, look at Greg Abbott's statement today. He says the order applies to any decision, including but not limited to granting or denying benefits, managing agency employees, entering or enforcing agency contracts, licensing and permitting decisions, or enforcing state laws and regulations. That was a memo he sent out to all state agencies. Is that something that you feel like lawmakers are going to have to deal with, or is it just a, something that Governor Abbott's going to put out there, and that's just how it's going to be?
Well, that appears to me to be thumbing our noses, basically, at the United States government and at our Constitution and the ruling of the Supreme Court of the United States. I think the reality of it is, though, that this will probably take up a certain amount of bandwidth, and it could cost taxpayers a lot of dollars. It seems to be an effort to set up potential litigation that could be ongoing, continue to fan the flames of divisiveness unnecessarily. I think it's inevitable, though, that the outcome will be that we will recognize the law of the land, which we now understand to be that same-sex marriage is recognized, is protected. And so all of this stuff that's come out from the governor, I think, is rhetorical, is something that just could invite lawsuits, and I don't think will ultimately change anything. I think it'll just prolong what has been very divisive.
Also looking forward, many counties have been waiting to see what the Attorney General here in Texas might do. He has talked about his office addressing questions about the religious liberties of clerks of court and justices of the peace. Is that something you think needs to be looked at right now as well?
Well, I know that locally in Travis County, Dana DeBeauvoir talked about the fact that she was going to be looking, as she should, to the county attorney. That's the person that will be interpreting law for her. I don't know what our Attorney General has to say at this point that should have any merit or relevance to what's going on at the county clerk level. I mean, the fact is, this ruling did come out of our United States Supreme Court. It is the law of the land. So the fact that the Attorney General is suggesting that they need to wait and get clarification, I think it's pretty clear what the ruling was today, and no further clarification seems to be necessary to me.
What if a county clerk doesn't want to issue a marriage license because they believe that there should not be same-sex marriage?
I guess it would be the same as what if they didn't want to issue a license to an interracial couple? I mean, would we tolerate that? I don't think so. I think the point is that we are Texans and we are Americans. We are citizens that have equal rights, and that was affirmed today. And for us to tolerate anything less than that is, in my opinion, unconstitutional and un-American. And the fact is that if you have a job where you are to provide services to citizens of this state, then you provide those services. And you can refrain from doing things that affect your religious beliefs by not participating in that job if you don't want that job. But, you know, we have to draw a line somewhere. We can't have the civic society parsed up based on everybody's individual beliefs. We have a common good for society, and we protect everybody's religious beliefs, but we also, in our Constitution, protect from religious infringement. And so I believe we have the protections in place already, and that's the way that this society works, and I'm grateful for that. I think that it allows us the freedom and the liberty that we keep hearing about at the Capitol. This is about liberty. This is about freedom and liberty for all Americans.
Is there anything that you feel like lawmakers will try to do to further protect what has happened today?
Well, you know, though it's not directly related, I hope that this is a step in the right direction toward removing discriminatory practices. We like to think of ourselves as being a very business-friendly state. We welcome people to move to Texas, to set up shop here, to raise their families, to have a fair go at the dream we have here in Texas. We don't want discriminatory practices in the way that prevent people from working hard and supporting their families. So I hope that we will see further things such as protections from employment discrimination. I think that would be a very key thing for us to be looking at, and I am hopeful that in this next session that we will address some discriminatory practices. And in fact, I would love to see an interim charge. I'm going to be proposing that to the Speaker of the House that says we do need to look at not only the practices that are the statutes that are in place that might be affected specifically related to this legislation, but what can we do to continue to work toward non-discriminatory practices in our state?
Speaker Strauss is a Republican, you
Yes.
know, and of course, as you've mentioned, that politics is involved in this whole talk. Do you think that he's going to listen to your plea for an interim charge?
I think that Speaker Strauss is a fair man and someone who recognizes that he represents the entire body of the Texas Legislature on the House side, as well as he represents not only his district but the best interests of our state. He's certainly a pro-business Republican and wants to do things that will make Texas strong. I think the business community stepped up pretty clearly in this last session to let us know that discriminatory practices would have a huge impact on our economic future. Many of the large businesses, especially in this state, came out publicly to say that we needed to not implement discriminatory practices in regard to the LGBT community. You know, there's realities of politics. One of the biggest realities of politics in Texas is that we have redistricting that has drawn lines that make it very non-competitive in many areas, and we also have very few people that exercise their right to vote. And because of that, because we have so few people come out, we have small minorities, it seems, that dictate the outcomes of these elections, and unfortunately the politicians oftentimes defer to those minority groups. But I think that Texans have indicated that they're ready to move forward. This is the 21st century. Older generations like myself are going to start going away, and the younger people that are coming up behind us are clearly not anywhere near as interested in putting these discriminatory practices in place. So I hope we'll move forward.
Will your suggestion for that interim charge include repealing the wording for banning same-sex marriage in Texas?
Oh, certainly that would be a part of it. I mean, that clearly is related to today's ruling. And so we need to immediately, I think, take care of what's in our Constitution and in our statute that now does not comport with the law of the land. So yeah, that would definitely be a part of it. We still have things on the books in regard to homosexual behavior, which is still on the books as unlawful. Clearly, that's something that needs to be addressed and changed. There's probably a lot of things there, and that's why we need to have this review.
All right, anything we've missed?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
All right.